So, welcome to another episode of Beta Talk. Today, we're going to talk about finance. Before we do that, I'd like to thank my sponsor, who are Intergas Heating Solutions. Please check them out on their website. So, joining me today, I've got Robert Whitney. I know Robert, I've known Robert for a long, long time, good friend. We'll talk about his sort of history in the industry, I'm sure, as we get more into the podcast. And then I'm joined by David Levisor. I think that's how I pronounce it, David. Is that right?
Yeah,
I
fair
did
enough.
ask
Yeah.
it. uh, and just explain, David, what your company's called, what it's doing in the finance space, and then we're going to have a lovely conversation about how, how we all probably think your finance is a big, big part of this jigsaw puzzle, isn't it?
Yeah, brilliant. Well, no, thanks for having us on, Nathan. We've been listening to you from the, very beginning since we started Fornax, so it's good to be here. Um, Fornax exists to make heat pumps radically more affordable. That's one of the big challenges with heat pumps is that upfront cost. Um, and we know that folks can be more comfortable in their home with a heat pump and they can make some bill savings with a heat pump as well. But it is very challenging, that upfront cost. And so we work on making the cost of installation lower. We have some technology to help with that. And then we work on spreading that cost out over time so that folks can have a manageable monthly payment and get their heat pump. And that is all covered by a maintenance plan, so annual servicing, so it continues to work well, and breakdown cover. So anything that goes wrong, that's on us, on Fornax to solve and fix, not on the homeowner. That's what we do.
Well, that's quite nice, isn't it? I mean, we've had some problems, haven't we, with this whole thing of so MCS, not so much now, but you used to have a consumer protection thing going on where if things did go wrong, basically
Yeah.
things did go wrong with their heat pump, people didn't seem to be getting the help they needed, whether that's from the engineer that had gone bust, so they no longer exist. They didn't. So you're now how are you different from anyone else that's in this space?
Well, as far as we're aware, we're the only folks out there who have that sort of integrated monthly plan to get your low carbon heating system and that full maintenance and breakdown cover. And the philosophy is right. Today, you go and buy a heat pump outright, or even you go and get a loan from a bank or a finance company and get your heat pump. And if something goes wrong, it's on you, the homeowner, to figure it out. You've got to figure out, is it a workmanship issue? Is it a manufacturer's issue? Have you got to go to MCS? Is there a dispute around that? Well, with these kind of products, what you're doing is it's on Fornax to figure it out. Because if there's a problem, the homeowner just stops the monthly payment. And if we want to get that monthly payment back, which we need as a business, we've got to sort it out.
Robert, so you and I know each other a long time. You've I just want to say to the listeners, Robert, bless him, has probably took the brunt of my criticism more than anyone else on social media over the years, and he's always been very, very gentlemanly in how he sees it. And I've always tried. I never try and be dismissive to people or impolite, but if I'm tough on the calls, I'll be tough on the calls. And Robert, you used to be in the control industry, which is how we kind of know each other, don't you? And you're now working for this lovely company. I mean, just give us a bit of background history of how, because you've been in the game a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. So back in 2007, I think it was, I joined Honeywell and that was on the controls side. Had various roles through the years there, but yeah, mainly heating controls and bringing to market the modulation controls and digital controls, which everyone knows and loves these days, OpenTherm and things like that. And then, yeah, had some roles where I was looking at business and market development and working with organizations like BEMA and HHIC as well. And then about 5 years ago, I saw some changes happening in the industry. Obviously, the role at Honeywell was all about boilers and parts for boilers, and you could see quite quickly the light at the end of the tunnel for renewables and for heat pumps in particular. So around that time, I started to look into what would be involved in transitioning from combustion to electrification. And over the last 5 years, I've seen this journey evolve into actually this is now real, and it is a genuine thing that a customer can move from gas, have a fully electrified home, and have a heating system that works actually better than the boiler system they had before. So been looking at all different technologies and what it would really mean for an existing gas installer to learn about heat pumps and get good at fitting them. I left Honeywell, joined another tech startup called Tepio, who you know, and then that came to an end last year, and then got chatting to Dave in particular about Fornax, and obviously Fornax is there to solve the missing piece of affordability of heat pumps. These things are great, but they're super expensive still, and as well as solving the finance issue, Fornax is looking to install really, really good heat pumps. So I get involved as technical director, working with the installers on the system design, specs of the systems, the heat pumps, open loop design, all that good stuff that you know and love, Nathan. Weather compensation, is it all in our DNA? I'm working really closely with both the really good heat pump installers, but also the regulations and the companies like MCS that you need to work with to get this stuff out there. And I've known Matt Aylett at Desnes for nearly 5 years. I've got an electrification of heat pump in my home, which is obviously you know all about as well. So and that's really what got me involved in the heat pumps, and that whole journey that I've gone on that you followed with interest over the last 4 and a bit years of taking, a typical heat pump that was low performing up now to nudging SCOP 4 on a good day. So I was really keen to apply all of that knowledge and experience that I've gained, particularly in the last 5 years, to helping Fornax scale up and come to market and work with the installers to really start to make a difference and get these really great systems out there.
So just David, explain. So there's, as I think I said earlier, I don't know anything about the finance world. I probably should do. I'd be a richer person. But there's different ways people. So you've got like things like hire purchase models. You've got consumer hire agreements and stuff like this.
Yeah.
So have you got some? I mean, when I said have you got something different to what other people are offering? I mean, Aira do a financial package. I don't, and for
Yeah.
I imagine all my listeners know who they are, but they're the Swedish company that are sort of installing over Italy, Germany, and in the UK. But is yours different to theirs then?
Yeah. So there's where we're at today, whether it's Fornax or Era, and then there's where we're going, right? And that's a big part of this consultation, right? And I think there's pretty much consistency across industry, HomeTree as well, great company out there currently offering solar products and working hard on a heat pump product. That what we would describe as a leasing model can really bring the costs down to customers and also improve the outcome. So wrapping in that maintenance, wrapping in that breakdown cover, right? It's an integrated financing product where you've got kind of like a loan, you're lending capital, but also it's helping with the installation and the maintenance. It's all one product together. That's where we all want to go. That's a part of what the bus consultation is trying to enable, right? But that's not where we're at today. And where we're at today is Era, for example, have a personal loan product, as I understand it, in the market. So it's a standard financing product. Fornax has something a little bit different. It's quite unique and innovative. We do not have a consumer hire product for a heat pump. We do not have a lease for a heat pump today, oddly enough, even though we're all about making heat pumps more affordable. What we do is help a homeowner get heat pump ready. So as you know, when you're installing a heat pump, it's not just about the box that goes outside your home, right? There's a whole lot more work to do. We help people finance those pieces of equipment, whether it's a radiator, whether it's controls, so on and so forth, right? We sell people heat pumps. And you're looking at me like that all sounds a bit mad. Well, the reason we do that and the reason, say, an Era doesn't have that leasing product in the market and HomeTree doesn't is the boiler upgrade scheme. And it's the rules in the boiler upgrade scheme. So the boiler upgrade scheme says the homeowner has to own the heat pump and you can't therefore lease them a heat pump. So all that homeowner can do is go out and get that 10, 12% loan and that means they'll own the heat pump, but they can't get a leasing product for it today.
Yes. Yes. So for people listening, this is one of the things that you, I suppose essentially the bus scheme was very welcomed. It gives the
Yeah,
people access to some money, doesn't it? But for entities that want to do things a little bit different, like heat as a service is often
yeah,
a term. It couldn't be done because the homeowner had to buy that heat pump. And this
yeah,
is and I remember when I was when been chatting with Era, it kind of um, stalled what they would really want to be doing. Now
yeah,
you've got, oh, this is really interesting. So what you've realised is, well, actually, it's not just the heat pump people need and need help with financing. It's the cost of an engineer's time. It's the cost of upgrades.
yeah.
So that is what you do finance on a sort of and what do you call it again? What's the financial term? Is it higher?
Look, in the UK, we've got some quite curious regulations around
Mm,
consumer credit, right?
mm.
So it's very different from the rest of Europe. It's extraordinarily strict and stringent, much more so than in Europe. So when we talk about a lease, that's what kind of people understand, the lease the car or whatever. But really, under the Consumer Credit Act, when you're lending to an individual consumer, it's either a hire purchase product or a consumer hire product. Now, Fornax has a consumer hire product for those home upgrades. Were the bus rules to change, it would still be a consumer hire product. Unfortunately, the hire purchase product isn't really commercially viable. It's not possible to offer that to homeowners in the UK. I mean, it won't be even if the bus rules change.
Yeah, I like this. So it's because obviously people are starting to realize. So when people ask me, what is the big barrier for scaling up heat pumps?
Yeah, yeah.
And as you would both know, if you regularly listen to the podcast, one of the big barriers is we haven't got the competent engineers out there to do this. Um, Unfortunately, it's not an insurmountable challenge. We can get there, but I'd argue we're not getting there with the things we've got in place at the moment, especially with how we're training people. But the other problem for the consumer is the cost. For them to do this is a cost. So people think, well, can we bring the price of heat pumps down? Can we bring the price of the cost of doing the installation down? Well, they're quite hard things because yes, some heat pumps will come down, but fittings and components are generally always going to be going up. They're made
Yeah.
of metal. Metal prices tend to go up historically, and you can't expect engineers to do things on the cheap. This.
No, absolutely not. And
Yeah.
if I could jump in, I'd say what's really cool about these leasing models, why they make so much sense, right, is there's something of a virtuous circle that gets created. So when we think about risk, when you're lending to someone, there's risk, right? And that's what drives the return on the product of an interest rate effectively is how you could think about that. And the riskier it is, the higher the interest rate would be, so the more the customer has to pay. Mortgages, very low risk, very low rates. Right now, those heat pump loan products, way above 10% because the banks lending them understandably don't know anything about heat pumps. It's just a loan. It's nothing that's linked to the heat pump. When you have a leasing product and you have that business, like whether it's Aero, whether it's Fornax, really actively participating in the journey with the customer and the installer supporting them, you can lower the risk. So, we have a unique underwriting model. We process our expert partner engineers' designs. We look at a bunch of different data points very unique, specific to heat pumps and homes. And we can look at, okay, how is this heat pump going to work in that specific property with that specific customer? And actually, can we tailor the price to that customer? Because we know, it's going to work really well because this specific installer has done loads of jobs with us. We monitor all the systems. We know he's a great installer. So we know it's not going to break. And the breakdown's our risk because if it breaks, we've got to pay to fix it. And that's how actually you align everything, where you do the better the engineering you do, and actually the better quality the engineers, the lower the rates you can lend at, right? And that's really, really important to this story.
Mm. It's very interesting because my head's thinking, right, people are leasing the radiators, their new radiators, and that's something we've sort of never seen in the industry before. I'd argue, and it's quite an interesting.
Yeah, I think what people get hung up on, right? they're used to cars being leased, right? Or
Yeah.
actually, no one thinks about this, but all your mobile phones are leased. Actually, the contract you sign is a consumer hire contract. And the reason that is the case is because the government regulations since 1974 have said the only products that can exist for a lease structure are that hire purchase product and that consumer hire product, right? Those are the only two possible structures you can use. And it's very strictly controlled what the features of those products are. And their genesis was with cars, right? Actually. Now, this is a great example to bring up, but I touched on earlier why you can't actually offer hire purchase for heat pumps. So the difference between the two products is with a hire purchase product, at the end of the agreement, the homeowner owns the system, right? Effectively, just like with a car, you make your payments, and at the end you own it. With consumer hire, you don't. You don't own it. Now, you would have thought hire purchase, great. We all want to do that. We looked at it as a business. We wanted to do that because it makes it really simple for the customer. They understand it. They love to own the system at the end. Brilliant. Unfortunately, the regulations that we have specify cancellation rights for the consumer. And that's in the consultation. You'll see it. And everyone looks at it and thinks, brilliant. Yeah, the consumer should have cancellation rights. We wouldn't disagree with that. We've got them in all our contracts. A clear price you can exit. But the trouble with hire purchase is it's very, very specific. And it says, okay, if you cancel, you've got to pay a certain formula. And the way that formula works is if you get your heat pump installed with a hire purchase plan, and then the very next day call up the company and cancel it, the company loses thousands of pounds because of this formula. And to go and get the equipment, it's a heating system, it's not a car. It would cost the company even more money, £2,000-3,000 to go and deinstall it and take the equipment away. And then they've got all this equipment which has been used. You can't reinstall that in another home because the manufacturer warranty is invalid. And you can't use it for the bus because the bus says all equipment has to be new. And so the company's lost 5, 6, 7, 8 grand on that hire purchase contract. So they can never, ever offer those contracts, even though, like I said, we'd love to, we wanted to do that. So really all you're left with is consumer hire. And that's the product effectively that the folks are going to use.
Are you up and running?
Yeah. We've got a
Yeah.
bunch of customers. Yeah.
So so I suppose you're looking for a couple of things. You're looking for good engineers to work with or good SMEs to work with. I mean, Robert, obviously this is your space, and I suppose you've been chatting to, because I suppose from a heating installation company's perspective, they are going to be able to win more customers if they can say, look, yeah, by the way, you haven't got to worry about this upfront cost. We can offer you something, because we're not allowed to, unless, I mean, because you have to have very strict, if you'd have to be a large SME to have the sort of to be allowed to offer purchase deals, don't you? It says, because it
Yeah.
comes under the FCA, does it, or something like that, something authority.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, the installers they're our partners. We're looking for really good, experienced heat pump installers. Opening that out a little bit very soon, but essentially the initial partners we've got are people that are known to me in the industry, that some of the big names, and we partner with them. They're the experts in doing in doing the systems and the installations. We support them obviously with the finance piece, but also, as Dave alluded to, our risk analysis model is absolutely key to matching the right solution to the right home. And, obviously I'm a big heat pump nerd all over the different technologies and the system design and whatever. So we bring that expertise and that underwriting of the technology that's actually specified into the home. So all of our projects are obviously MCS compliant. They have to be to get hold of the upgrade scheme grant. And we went through the process of gaining MCS for ourselves. We're MCS design and installation organization, and we partner with the installers to deliver basically higher than MCS requirements, as you'd expect. And by partnering in that way, we get the best of both worlds. We allow the installation partners to be at their best, enable them, but also take away a lot of the headaches of a lot of the admin, which a lot of them, as you know, hate. We've developed systems and processes to get all that really, really straightforward for them. So it is a true partnership. We're looking for really, really good installers. We can help them with the finance. We can help them with the MCS accreditation piece. And yeah, we're obviously talking today about the changes to the upgrade scheme grant, because there's all sorts of changes being proposed. We've seen huge changes in MCS itself over the last year with how they assess and how they audit the installers. And now DESNZ have come out with a huge raft of proposals, not only the technologies that may be included within bus, but the finance structures, and also proposals that it would only be MCS that is the only route to compliance. So there's a huge amount of work gone into all of these assessments.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, we really focus on working with independent installers. That's the majority of the industry, and that can be, a one-man band. We've got folks we work with who are like that, and then yes, it can be the slightly larger SME installers, right? We're not in that group of folks, whether it's your Aras, your Octopuses, where we are hiring installers directly in-house. We're looking to partner with the existing industry here. And that can be done. Yes, there are a bunch of, again, unsurprisingly, stringent regulations around advertising, distributing credit. So we take the lead on that as a business, and then we help bring leads to the installers, for example. But you can figure that out, right? So we can get even the smaller installers into our partnership. It takes a bit of time, effort, and care, but we can all work together and support that critical part of the industry, right? This isn't just for the big installers.
Yeah, exactly that.
So you can work with companies, SMEs, installers that have got their own MCS, or if they haven't, you can act like an umbrella. You can kind of cater for both. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a critical part of Rob's job and our underwriting model, right? Because what we're doing is, and that by the way is whether folks are working with our heat pump plan, to get their low carbon system on a pay monthly basis, or it's if they just want to buy it outright. We help our installers with both, and we take care of all the MCS paperwork and the IBGs and all the hassle, right? Because we've got the scale and the ability to do that. We've got some technology that makes it easy, so we can help folks with that as well if they'd like.
David, before I forget, I mean, you and I have met actually before. I mean, we've had a nice cup of coffee at the Leicester offices. You come from the finance world, don't you? If I remember rightly,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
right.
yeah.
I spent like 10 years in Asia, the US, Europe, helping people develop, build, buy, sell, finance renewable power projects, basically. So very, very similar to this. And I kind of worked with some heat pump companies in the US. And a lot of these models have been deployed before, right? If you look at America and how rooftop solar has been really successfully rolled out there, it's using this kind of model, this leasing structure. If you look at Canada with water heaters, going back to like the 70s, 60s when they first came out, there's a business called Enercare. Like 50% of people in Ontario, they actually get their water heater, water cylinder with a product like this. It's very, very common. It's been very successful because it bridges that affordability problem, but also that maintenance and care problem as well.
The maintenance thing, I don't think we've touched on enough because obviously, yeah, like I said earlier, one of the biggest problems of mass rollout is people can't afford it. But
Yeah.
for when people have got these systems in,
Yeah.
another big problem comes about, because I think people think heat pump systems will last forever or things can't go wrong. Well,
Yeah.
unfortunately they can. And so the maintenance thing is a bit of a conundrum that's not many people tend to talk about. But you kind of thought about this, and this is a solution, is it? Because it's now incumbent upon you to get it sorted out rather than the
Bang
homeowners.
on. Yeah, rightly so, right? I mean, and actually what's really interesting to us is, to be honest, when we first came into this, we were very focused on affordability. And yeah, the maintenance is to our benefit, right? If we maintain the systems well, that's our risk protected. But actually what we found is two things. One, we've got a bunch of customers who already have heat pumps. So their heat pumps came up, right? They were old, tired for a renewal, and they wanted to go with Fornax for their new heat pump, not covered under the bus, right? Because, they valued the peace of mind because they had experience with a heat pump and actually thought, well, this is brilliant. I do my maintenance every year and that's included. And the second kind of learning we took was like there are customers out there who say that they're maybe not super focused on the affordability. Like they're close to being able to afford it. You know, everyone's different. You know, everyone's got different finances at home, right? And so what they do is they say, well, look, I'll put a reasonable deposit down on this, and I'll only take a slightly smaller portion that will be financed with the plan. But what I'm really looking for primarily is this peace of mind. I want the plan, not just because, yeah, it helped me with that final piece on the affordability front, but also, yeah, my maintenance is there. And this is a new system. I've never heard of a heat pump. And it means I can be really, really confident that it's going to work in my home.
So you offer basically a very bespoke service for every individual
Yeah.
customer, homeowner, person that wants a heat pump, don't you?
Yeah, I mean we all know, right? Like heat pumps are bespoke to the home, right? And that's why you need an expert engineer in the home, carefully designing it. And so what we're trying to do, it seems sort of contradictory, is bring that scale and support for what is ultimately a bespoke experience for the customer and the installer, right? That's the name of the game there.
Mm.
Yeah, and to do that, Dave, we're every heat pump we install is fully remote monitored. We're looking at technologies and heat pumps and other equipment in the house to make sure that it's installed and commissioned optimally, that it's optimized post commissioning, and then as an ongoing basis, we're monitoring the performance to make sure that it's safe and reliable, and B, that the performance is tuned perfectly. So, you know, obviously the weather comp curves are set and they're guessed a lot of the time. We're optimizing those curves and also looking at things like heat pump optimizers to make sure that the experience is perfect for customers. And we're then looking at things like, condition-based maintenance. So the the survey and the design and the install is obviously hugely important. The commissioning and then the aftercare is just as important, when you're looking at attaining reliability and high performance for the life of the heat pump.
And when you say monitor, because obviously I know your own system at home got monitored because it was part of the electrification of heat project. And
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, I think you're on OEM as well, aren't you? Open Energy Monitor, are you?
Yep.
Yeah, you
Yep.
are, aren't you? So how are your installs? Are they monitored with MID equipment, or is it all the internal monitoring of a specific heat pump?
It varies depending on the equipment. Some of the manufacturer's own equipment is very, very capable, and we'll tie in with that. Other times we'll need to fit some third-party optimizer onto it. But whatever equipment and whatever optimizer we use, that all comes into us, and we basically keep an admin portal review on live all of the equipment that we've got out there, and we're looking to do predictive monitoring. So the holy grail is to not wait for the customer to phone you, but to contact them to say, look, we've noticed your heat pump's a little bit off. And this is all part of the holistic aftercare. As Dave said, we're on the hook with these systems for life, for the life of the system and the heat pump plan. So, it's in everyone's best interest that they're performing optimally.
So let's chuck in. Let me play devil's advocate. Yeah, as you can tell from my facial expressions, I really like this little system you've got going. Let's say something did go wrong in a
Yeah,
particular location,
yeah,
and whoever installed it in that location, who would
yeah,
be the obvious choice to sort of maybe go and rectify it. They're competent. You want to only work with competent engineers. But let's say they didn't exist anymore.
yeah.
How do you then solve that problem of quickly getting that heating up and
I,
running again?
I can give you a real world example because yeah, we'd love to be perfect, but we're not perfect yet. We've had an issue so the other week, I think it was our first customer actually. They had an issue with their heating and their hot water, and the installer was on holiday. So and that happens. He's a one man band. He was on holiday. Customer couldn't get hold of him, and we're there, and Rob's immediately out there on site, right? But also, we can see from the data anyway, and we can diagnose the fault, and we get Valent on site really, really quickly. And they were brilliant. They came out super responsive, got it sorted for the customer. And it didn't cost the customer a penny, right? And nor should it. And when you're that customer, you don't really know what to do. Understandably, it's quite complicated. You've got all these warranties, maybe you don't know who to call. The installer maybe thinks it's one thing, but we're there to be the quarterback, basically, to sort of figure out what's wrong. It's on us. And we got that sorted within 24, 48 hours, right? Pretty quickly.
And I mean, one of the reasons I asked and playing this little game with the, I mean, because you've got some very, very established heat pump manufacturers in Europe who are
Yeah,
now struggling with
yeah,
maintenance.
yeah,
I don't want to mention names because they keep having emergency meetings every time I mention their name anyway. But it's 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 going to be a thing because they're struggling. They can't get parts of this country, which no one really understands why.
yeah,
Because if it is a part issue, you're not so much relying on right. We need someone to go and put that part in, test it, and commission it again. You're relying on that part being where you need it
right,
in an appropriate time frame. Now, Rob
right.
and I know the boiler well very well. You know, it doesn't tend to happen that you're waiting more than a couple of days to get a boiler back up and running because of a part. But I'm hearing people that have had heat pumps down for 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks,
Yeah.
and that's not good enough for a customer, especially midwinter.
No, it's not. But what I'd say to you, Nathan, is right, with our model, what happens is um, there's an issue like that and it's on us and it's our fault and we can't resolve it. Um, rightly the customer is going to get, refunded or they're not going to pay or we're gonna look after them, right? But what you're describing is customer has paid 7, 8, 9 grand, way more than that, and then they're sitting around cold for 4 weeks, right? I'm incentivized
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
go fix it because otherwise I'm losing money day by day by day, right? And we're doing the maintenance, right? We're monitoring the systems, all best practice. We're helping our installers to offer that, right? It's very difficult to offer, that sort of 24/7 monitoring, right? If you're just on your own. So it's all this model really does align interests, right? And if you think about the current challenges in the heat pump industry, and it's important it's more important than ever we respond to them, because if we're going to get growth and we're going to get people adopting heat pumps, right, there's a reputational risk. We've got to establish a really strong reputation for them. These models can really help with that. Rather than the current situation where all the risk is borne by the consumer, who's really least well able, understandably, to figure out what those risks are because they've never heard of a heat pump before and don't know what can go wrong.
Yeah. And that's the thing, Nathan, is that as we know, the technology has been around a while now, and heat pumps are either really successful or the customer experience is poor. And everything that we're building at Fornax is all to really achieve a really, really great outcome, from the affordability to the survey experience, the installation, the aftercare, explaining how to get the most of using the heat pump. A lot of this stuff, you see so many discussions on the forums, and there's a load of confusion out there. What we're trying to do is make heat pumps simple for everybody involved.
And how do you create awareness? Because I suppose you're looking for consumers, you're looking for engineers. How are you starting to create awareness with them two cohorts? I mean, you guys are at Installer Show for a start, aren't you? Are you?
We've been to install a show. We actually we would say we fly under the radar a little bit generally. Look, we're building this quite carefully. You don't want to go out there and launch and install 2,000 heat pumps, right? And then begin to learn about some of these issues. You've got to balance it. This is, like I said, we're a nascent industry. This is nascent technology we're deploying. You've got to go steady and sure, right? And you've got to learn as you go. And each time we do a project, Rob leads a deep dive review. We update our models. So, we think slow and steady wins the race here. You've got to be pretty careful as you roll this out. I think actually, in terms of awareness with or it's very popular with the customers, right? So, we have quite high conversion rates when we offer folks, this plan. It's a lot higher than what we see is probably what's out there in the industry in general. Installers, generally have been approaching us. We haven't really advertised with installers because we're able to support them with a bunch of tooling to make their life easier. But also, yes, we've got this product that can support their business. We've got a maintenance offer for them where actually, you know, that's a long, steady stream of income they can build a business around for each heat pump they install, so they can have the confidence to grow their own company. I think awareness, as we've seen in the consultation, is broader. You know, we think it's right the government have launched the consultation, but we think that in the industry and in government, there isn't always a broad awareness of what these products are, what they can do, what the relevant regulations are, understandably, because all of the folks working on this are heat pump people, they're energy people, right? And actually, a lot of this is financial. And the regulations are consumer credit regulations, FCA regulations, and so on and so forth. And you can see that in some of the consultation proposals, that awareness isn't there, understandably, and that's what we're trying to do on our side in our response and speaking with folks in the heat pump industry.
So let's talk more about that. This bus consultation, it's because it closes soon, doesn't it?
Closed on the 11th at midnight, yeah, and then obviously government will take some time to consider all the responses.
And do you feel like they're going to go in the direction you'd like them to go in with regarding finance, or what your sort of spidery sense is telling you?
I think the challenge is so the consultation acknowledges that third-party ownership models can be supportive here to consumer adoption. That's clear. That's why they've launched the consultation, right? So I think at a high level, right, where I think this is a huge risk of falling down, and we've seen this unfortunately before with things like the Green Deal, RHI, is the devil's in the detail, and especially in this case where there's, you know, some complexity in regulation. And so when we look at the proposals, you know, just to throw out a few examples, the proposals all focus on consumers. But actually, there are 1 million homes owned by limited companies. It's the fastest growing segment of the landlord space. The folks most at risk of fuel poverty are folks with direct electric systems. They're typically tenants in landlord properties. We don't really have landlords installing heat pumps. We need to get them doing that. What are we going to do for those folks, right? And actually, the proposals in here talk about hire purchase and consumer hire. Well, those are consumer products. What about for the corporate entities, corporate landlords? You know, we need to hear what the proposals there are. I talked about cancellation rights on hire purchase. You know, it's a great product. We'd love to offer it because it would make our lives a lot easier selling the product to consumers. It's a non-starter. It cannot work. No one's ever going to be able to offer that product. Or if they did, it would be at such a high interest rate that it would be unaffordable, and that's not solving the problem. I'll give you one more example just in here where, you know, there's a very understandable concern about repossession. You know, if I have a finance agreement, what if I don't pay? Are you going to come into my home and effectively remove my heating system? Now, there's a proposal on that. Look, we should ban repossession of the equipment. And, you know, we're sure that every single person responding it will go, yes, absolutely, we should ban repossession of the equipment. The reality of, you know, the financing space is that mortgages have that right. Ultimately, you only have 6,000 homes a year out of 28 million that are ever repossessed, but ultimately they do have that right. And with a heat pump, if we take away that right for repossession, it will cost more for everyone. And you have a bunch of very, very stringent regulations which protect consumers here, because, you know, you cannot go into a home without a court order. And furthermore, you wouldn't want to go into a home and rip out a heating system because it will cost you $2,000 to $3,000 to go and do it. You have a terrible brand name, but also what all debt recovery processes do is, if you do get to that, you offer a plan to your customer, you hope they can pay you back because that's the way you'll get more money back as a business. And then ultimately, if you can't and they're non-responsive and they don't sort of try and help you find a resolution, you simply go through what's called a CCJ process, right? And that's very standard in the industry. None of this is new. It's all out there in the financing industry. But the last thing on earth you're ever going to go and do is spend $3,000 throwing good money after bad to remove a heat pump system, which you then can't use for anything afterwards. But it's just this technicality of, well, if you remove that detail and that right, it does make things more expensive and cause problems in the weeds, basically. And that's what there's quite a bit of in the consultation. And we're just a bit concerned that, hold on, we do need some experts on financing here in the room. We do need to get into the detail. We need to really think through the consequences of all of these proposals, because what we don't want is just like we have with the Green Deal, where there's one financing product that ends up being offered to folks. No one wants it. It's very expensive. and we don't improve any heat pump adoption.
Hmm. Yeah.
So obviously that's my bro. I mean, apologies. I
Sorry,
mean,
that was a lot.
no, because you've made some really interesting points there. So there's part of my brain thinks, well, I would have thought the government departments are really, really up on this whole finance piece, but
No,
perhaps,
they totally are though, right,
yeah,
Nathan? As in like the Treasury is, the FCA
yes,
are, because those are the guys who this is all already regulated, right? There's
yeah,
nothing I do that isn't unbelievably way you get, your installers listening out there who think MCS are like tough, right? The FCA is super, super stringent. We have the most heavily regulated consumer credit industry in Western Europe. Okay. That's one reason there aren't any financing products out there at competitive rates today, right? That is one of the big reasons, okay? There's some of the detail of that regulation. The government's launched a consultation at the same time as this bus consultation to reform that Consumer Credit Act, to reform some of these regulations because they're so dated. They're from the 70s. They don't even account for the internet, right? That's the thing here is look, this is all very, very strictly regulated already. That's why, even if someone wants to go into a home and repossess a heat pump, they absolutely can't do it, right? You'd lose your license immediately. But the folks in DESNZ aren't responsible for that. Understandably, that's not their focus, that's not their training, that's not their expertise. And so they're looking at this and thinking through all these real world consumer protection concerns, which are important. But I think they're not always sort of super across, oh, actually, that's covered already, you know, or the full detail, right? And that's, to the government's credit, they've always talked about joined up government, mission driven government, right? And this is a great example of that, where we need folks in government across departments really coordinating so that everyone's across all the relevant pieces of legislation and existing consumer protection.
and you mentioned something there, not that it's really sort of relevant to you said you said a number of how many homes do get repossessed in this country, and it's
Yeah, the number from UK Finance I last saw, I think for last year was 6,000 homes out of 28 million homes. So it's very, very low. But we'd say there's not going to be a single repossession of the heat pump system because
yeah.
just yeah.
I mean,
whole bunch of
the only thing I've got, because I used to know, I spent a lot of time out in America back in the day, and they call it foreclosure. I think they call it foreclosure.
foreclosure, yeah.
And they had a massive problem with that at one point, as we know.
Yeah.
Um, so and what else is going on in the bus consultation? Because obviously I'll badge this up as an episode that we're talking about the bus. Anything, Robert, that sort of strikes you as interesting?
Yeah, there's a couple of really interesting areas actually, more on the sort of technology piece. And obviously, the boiler upgrade scheme grant is all about electrifying homes, right? It's getting rid of the combustion boilers and direct electric heat into efficient electrified heating. And there's been all sorts of talk for some time about, are they going to allow hybrids in? That's not being proposed, but what is being proposed is adding in an area that you know all about, and that's HVAC systems, air to air heat pumps. So there's a whole load of questions about that and whether, the feedback is from the consultation from the industry is whether that needs to be added. We've talked about this internally. I think an air to water heat pump and an air to air heat pump are chalk and cheese. They're two different skill sets. You've got the hydronic heating engineers and you've got the fridge engineers, and they're two different sides of a coin, aren't they? So I think personally, I would say the air to air systems are well established already. They're sold globally, and there's a whole industry supporting those as well. I looked at some of the figures, 225,000 air to air heat pumps in UK, 50,000 installers. So that industry is already established. I think the focus needs to be converting the existing gas engineers to heat pump engineers, and where that next generation, Nathan's, going to come from. We're all getting quite old in the industry now, and we'll probably be retired in 10 years. But where's this next generation going to come? And it's got the enthusiasm for heat pumps and all the advanced technology that comes with it. I mean, the heating's one piece, the kind of energy smart technology setting up when it works with batteries and solar and with the smart tariffs is another, and that's a whole nother world. So I think the big focus is got to be on, developing heat pump installers and the industry to support that. And I think things like bringing in air to air is perhaps a bit confusing for people, bit of a dead end.
Yeah, absolutely agree with Rob. Obviously, I think it's interesting. What is the purpose of the boiler upgrade scheme? Are we trying to just deliver a certain number of heat pumps into a certain number of homes? Are we trying to really build a leading industry in the UK, a leading green industry in the UK? That's not necessarily for us to answer, right? But I think when we look at all these proposals, we've got to make sure it's coherent to an objective. I think what I see in the proposals, whether it's on technology type, whether it's on third party ownership, whether it's on the certification requirements. So should we permit alternatives to MCS or ban those effectively, right? Throughout there's this thread of deep prescription, right? So it's like we're going to say exactly these clauses in these agreements and this specific thing, and government is going to really mandate to the nth degree what we should all be doing. We're in a nascent industry. There's a lot of innovation going on. I mean, you've had some brilliant folks on your podcast, whether it's folks like Era, whether it's folks like Havenwise, there's a lot of new folks in this industry, a lot of money getting invested. We have this opportunity to really improve things for consumers, improve things for installers. I'm not sure if we're going to get there, and we've got there previously with other schemes where we try and envisage every single scenario, and we are very, very prescriptive in all the rules and regulations, right? We're thinking, look, let's go principles based. That works in the financial world, which the UK is reasonably successful with. Principles based, supportive of innovation, right? Rather than all these individual sort of requirements and regulations. From our side, right, with the bus, the existing rules, that's held heat pump deployment back by a couple of years because you couldn't offer, with our product that we've got, we love it, our customers love it, it's great, but it can be even cheaper for the customers, right? Our average now, obviously it depends on the type of home you've got, but you're around £100 a month with the heat pump, right? We've gone as low as 65 with some customers, but we can get that cheaper if we can wrap the heat pump into it. We can actually make the subscription model cheaper and cheaper as we go. But it's that tiny little regulation in the bus that's held us back, and it's the same potentially with some of these proposals again.
Very interesting. Like you said about it's because you could argue. I mean, people don't think this, and Rob and I have talked about building regulations. People think they're very, very stringent. You've got to use this, but they're not, and they allow you to be flexible. Interestingly, people think they don't. But have you two got opinions on this thing about MCS and them having a competitor? Have you? Would it help? Is it something that your company doesn't have to worry about, or would it help your company?
I think, yeah, look, it's a great question. I think it's again general principle based. Like we don't have a lot of direct, say, dialogue with MCS, right? We work with them. Obviously, we're an MCS registered installer. We understand, not ourselves as a business, but we've heard frustration with MCS from industry. We're not planning on moving, say, to an alternative if it was available anytime soon. We don't know the folks at FlexiOrb who've obviously been working hard to establish a business and an alternative, and good for them. Like we're also, trying to do something new. But we do just think probably MCS themselves would welcome competition. It seems strange to us that there isn't choice in the market, whether it's for the Installation Standard Authority, right? Unless DESNZ are going to do it themselves and take it in house. Choice that can create innovation, that can create things moving forward. Just like we'd say, whether it's ownership options, whether you want to buy it outright or get a loan or get a lease, there should be choice, right? I think that's generally our sort of philosophy as a business is choice.
Yeah, I suppose most people would say. I think what people are struggling to see is, well, what choice is there? What would be the differences between the two entities? One could argue that they're going to have a streamlined paperwork process because that's.
I can give you an example, right? Like MCS just did another consultation on which closed the other week themselves on what they call financial protection, so insurance-backed guarantees. now again, forgive me if I'm wrong, and this is actually driven by underlying legislation from the government, but what we saw was proposals to adhere to MCS standards. You would have to have an insurance back guarantee, right? Now those are currently 2 to 3 years, depends on who you're with, and effectively they cost £100+. So it's a little bit like a tax. Every single heat pump customer has to pay £100 because ultimately the cost falls to them to get an IBG. I don't have the data. I'd love to see if any IBG has ever paid out in the history of IBGs, right? Because if ever you've taken out an insurance product like that, they're very reluctant to pay out. And this proposal was saying by MCS, oh, great. Well, look, again, they put out some very strong consumer protections that we're going to increase the length of the IBGs. So they're going to be minimum 6 years. We're going to say that a minimum cover of 20 grand has to be available under the IBG. So not if the heat pump costs 7 grand, it'll be 7 grand, and those all sound great, but if you're increasing the cover and the limits, the cost is going to increase, I suspect, right? So suddenly we're going to have to put an IBG of £200-300, I don't know, they didn't provide any information on the cost impact, through to all our customers. Well, maybe Flexi will come along and say, actually, look, if you've got a third-party ownership product, which is providing a guarantee to a customer anyway, you don't need an IBG because it's a better form of protection. Or, sorry, actually, you still need an IBG, but on our terms, it's actually only going to be a 5-year IBG, not a 6-year IBG, or it's only going to be £6,000 in cover. That's just one example, right? But there is flexibility in these installation standards. I don't think anyone's saying we want flexibility in terms of really high quality installations going in homes, right? Or anything to do with that. But it's maybe around some of the paperwork style, the information that has to be provided, the audit processes. There's a ton of stuff you have to do, and there's got to be room for differences in approach there.
I mean, someone brought it up on LinkedIn recently. I did ask in a live installer show podcast I did about competition, because it exists in the so the audits, the heat pump audits that go on, it's right, MCS don't actually do the audit, it's the certification bodies, which will be people like APHC, Offtech, Napit, and there's quite a lot of competition amongst them now. I think there's 9, maybe more now actually, that are involved with heat pump installation. It's interesting. I get asked the question a lot. I mean, that Flexi all have chatted to me in the past a little bit, etc., etc. As you all probably know, kind of one of the entities that is involved with them is one of the consumer code people. Heis, I never remember how to pronounce it. And I suppose until people actually, if there was 2 in the space and they were up and running, and there was no one kind of really knows what to expect, I suppose. I've said to both of them, I've said to Flexi, I said, you're still going to encounter the same problems. So I kind of have found myself sticking up for MCS a bit recently, because they kind of get criticised for poor installations. And I've said there's 2 completely different sectors prior to MCS. So to be accredited with MCS, you have to be qualified. So that's 2 industries involved in that. That's the training industry, and then the awarding organisation that issues the certificate, BPEC and LCL Awards in this case. If they're not getting their service right, which I would argue, and I can argue probably better than anyone on this, they're not, then that's not incumbent on MCS. That's not their fault. They can only take on and accredit qualified installation companies. And if we've got a whole training process that's not working, the paradigm's broken. So, and I did say to Flexi, well, how would you solve that? Because I think there's this bit of a thing in existence that everyone thinks our training industry is okay, and or especially the awarding organisation thing is okay. Well, it's not. I think it's a completely broken paradigm, and until people are really, really going to scrutinise it, it's just going to carry on how it is. And people have been blaming MCS for the poor installs.
No, I think, Nathan, like I said, we don't actually know MCS all that well. I mean, Rob maybe does, but it is obvious how they can appear as like a whipping boy, right? And that's not fair, right? They're clearly all working hard. No one is sitting anywhere in the UK like willfully trying to achieve shit heat pump installs and that like cost loads, right? No one's doing that, right? We're all actually, whether it's MCS, whether it's startups, whether it's Octopus, whether it's Desnes, we're all ultimately trying to get people warmer in their homes, more affordable heating bills, right? And trying to grow heat pump adoption. So I definitely agree with that. We're not sort of casting shade or anything like that. I think it's just on the principle of, generally innovation, competition, those kind of things are considered good things, in our economy, in our country, right? And deliver change,
Oh, well, I know what I've got a question. So obviously, as we discussed right at the beginning, which really interested me, as you could tell from my facial expressions. So people are kind of the extra equipment, the radiators and etc. They're kind of leasing. Now, does that mean you've got good procurement deals of specific manufacturers, or are you going to think about that? Is that something you're going to be thinking of
Yeah,
in the
I
future?
think again we're pretty installer first, right? And a lot of the installers we work with have got existing relationships. And again, when you're installing a heat pump, look, yeah, you can procure, but like you need your reliable merchant who just they can sort you out with a part, right, when you need it. And there's more to the relationship than just like what's the cheapest price, right? So we never want to work, impose on our installers a really unfriendly way of doing business, right? It's their business. We're partners, right? We're not their boss. It's not sort of some integrated business where we're hoovering up all the installers or hiring them in. So that we are flexible. If installers want support with that, we have some installers who, especially they're new to the heat pump industry, they just come across. We support them with that, and one of the advantages of third-party ownership products, leasing products, is look, if you're buying in bulk, it's just like you get when you're putting in a new build housing site. You can get discounts from the house builders, and you can pass that on to the customer, and then the customer gets a cheaper heat pump, right? And that's brilliant. What we think with the installers is, it's really important, you touched on it, is we need to pay good installers, what they deserve, right? Not just because it's right, but also because it incentivizes them to spend the time and energy on the install to do a good job, right? We don't want people cutting corners when it's our risk. Also, we need to attract more installers into the industry to achieve the kind of scale we want, right? So, there's that distinction between the equipment, right, where I think we're all looking to try and bring the cost down. But I don't think we want to do that, or we want to be very careful how we do that with labor, right? I mean, our philosophy, the tech we're building is that let's give installers tools that, whether it's a heat loss survey, whether it's, automatically ordering equipment, whatever it is, saves them time, right? And that therefore means they can either spend more time with their families, or they can do more installs in that time. And so they can take home, actually more money, right, at the end of the day, at the end of the year. But it's not about like cutting wage rates, right? That's a terrible idea. That's just not going to work. It's not going to attract like the quality skilled labor we need in the industry.
I think it depends, Nathan, on like what level the installer at that we're working with. Some of them, as Dave said, they've already got great relationships with their local merchants, and we wouldn't want to inject ourselves into that unnecessarily. But others, they do need some help, not only with the system design and spec, but with the procurement, and that's where, yeah, we've been developing relationships with some of the major merchants, but also some of the manufacturers as well. And we're not being prescriptive about these things. So, you talked a little bit about umbrella schemes, and certain umbrella schemes will only work with certain manufacturers, and that's not our bag. We want to be helpful, we want to be flexible, and we want to essentially give the customer and the installer the best outcome.
Mm, mm. Well, I really, really like what you guys are doing. Really do. And wish you lots of success. And another thing, as it just pops into my head, things often do, because you're going to have kind of like a community of installation engineers. You can. It'll be very easy for you to sort of. You all know what I'm sort of famous for saying, peer-to-peer learning, and because you've kind of got that as part of your package, isn't it? You got you can all exchange information with each other, what you think's working with particular products,
Yeah,
what might not be.
that's bang on, Nathan. Like if you think about what we're doing here, right? With firstly, when you first meet the installer and you work with them, right? It's very much about gauging, where they're at with their business, their experience, right? It's not about just right, okay, you're super experienced and we're just going to work with you, right? And then it's about supporting them, whether it's their first install or they've done tons of installs in the right way for them. Monitoring the systems really helps, right? Because you can say, hey, look, we can show you this data. Like we've been monitoring the systems, tweak this, tweak that, or have you thought about this? But you need that conduit, right? And then we learn from our installers all the time because we see their designs, we see their procurement, what they're doing in a particular home, a type of property, a type of customer. And as you say, we can share that with the network, right? Because then everyone benefits.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. Lads, thank you ever so much for coming on. Like I say, I really enjoyed this episode, and I really like what you do. It's very needed, this whole financial piece. And yeah, I wish you all the best of luck in your endeavours.
Thanks for having us, Nathan.
Yeah, thanks, Nathan. Good to chat.
You're welcome.